you get to the moment where you're standing on the summit of life's mountain, looking down at the valley experiences and saying, who would have thought? How did I get here?
So, I mean, just one thing I'll just say, just outside when we were walking in, there was one chap who sort of stopped you and was really kind of overwhelmed by the fact that he remembered you from the Playaway days. Yeah. I know that is one of many, many different kind of paths your career has taken you on, but is that quite a usual reaction to have people who have that kind of wave of nostalgia and emotion when they see you?
It happens every day. Every day I get a message of love and affection through an email, maybe through one of my tweets, in the streets. And the supermarket actually is the place where people run towards me and stalk me in the supermarket, looking, with this kind of look of wonderment in their eyes, reminding them of when they were 2 and 3, when I said, hello, are you all right? Today, we're looking at you through the square window.
So I just touched on then the fact that actually that was just one part of a very significant career in terms of as an actress and as a singer, a politician currently, and I mean you seem to. It's a very full career, isn't it?
I am a very lucky girl. I feel so blessed that I've been able to do so many different things, and I think it's because I'm an optimist. And I always believe when one door closes, another one opens. And things happen for a reason. Everything happens for a reason in your life. And I tell young people, especially young teenagers who feel suicidal, who think, I can't go on anymore, what's the point? I say, you never know. You get to the moment where you're standing on the summit of life's mountain, looking down at the valley experiences and saying, who would have thought? How did I get here? And I do that every single day of my life. I think back about how it all started, and I think, who would have thought? It's that excitement of what's going to come next, and that's what I love about my life.
And what was the first kind of big break for you that got you into the industry?
My first big break, I think the thing that made me become a household name was Playschool. And in fact, this year is my 40th anniversary. 40 years ago, I started Playschool, 1976. And it was the pinnacle moment of my life changing completely. Because up until then, I did musicals, I did dramas. In fact, I started off working in a bank, in Barclays Bank. I wanted to be the first black woman bank manager. And I thought, that's the way to go.
It was Hair was the first sort of show, the first entertainment...
Well, yeah, I worked in a bank for 3 years, and I realized that I wasn't going to become a bank manager. Because everybody, when you're that young, we're talking about 1966, everybody over 30 looked ancient as a young teenager. So I thought, it's going to take me a long time to become a bank manager. And I saw an advert saying singers and dancers wanting for this show to tour Britain. And I thought, well, I can sing and I can dance. I'm going to go for it. So I remember going for the audition in my lunch hour. I put on this page boy wig and I had a mini skirt on, and I went up to Shaftesbury Theatre in my lunch hour. And I got on the stage and they said, can you sing? And I went, yeah. I've got you under my skin, mamba. Oh, lovely, lovely, lovely. Can you move? Oh, can I move? Well, I went one way, the wig went the other way. I tried to grab the wig, my dress is coming up here somewhere. And they said, lovely, 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 can you stay back and read for us? And I went, yeah, well, okay then. I looked at my watch and I think, crumbs, the hour's going. And the assistant bank manager, who didn't like me particularly, he'd have my guts for garters. So I said to the stage manager, listen, I've got to get on. I've got to get back to the bank. She said, all right, I'll let you go on next. So we went onto the stage and I read for them. And they said, lovely, lovely, lovely. Can you wait around a little while longer? Now, when you audition, as you know, you can't see the audience because everything is all dark in the auditorium. And so I stood on the stage and I said, listen, you lot, I don't know who you are out there, but I've got a proper job in a bank. I don't need you. And if you want me, I want £30 a week and I'm not taking my clothes off. And they said, well, you got to. This is Hair. And I went, I'm sorry, my mother wouldn't like it, so I'm off. And I left. And by the time I got back to the bank, they'd called me and said, I got the job. Now, I begged my mother to let me do this job, and she said, no, I bring you to England for you to go on a stage gallivanting with naked people, taking drugs and drinking. No way. And my father, who was a jazz musician, he begged for me. And I went and I said to the boss of the bank, I worked for Barclays Bank, I said to the boss, now listen, can I have 6 months leave of absence? Because I've got this job. It's not a proper job, but I'll be back for sports day, because I was the Vitrix of Barclays Bank, fast run, and he was the chairman of the sports club. I'll be back for sports day. Just let me have 6 months leave of absence. And he gave me 6 months leave of absence. I didn't get a leaving present, which was a downside of leaving then. And I went and did this job, hair, and I toured all over the country. And that's where I met my wonderful husband, Keith, 46 years ago. And the rest is history. I never went back to the bank, and I never took my clothes off. When they knew, I used to hide. I'm not looking. You
didn't even appear on the sports day.
Sorry?
You didn't even appear for the sports day.
I know. But I didn't get a leaving present. And
okay. So the two equal themselves out.
Is that? Well, I did This Is Your Life with Michael Aspel with the Big Red Book. And Paul Nicholas came on, and Paul Nicholas plays Claude in the show, and he played the dead body of the soldier. And he said, now listen, Floella, there were two people in the show who didn't take their clothes off. I was one because I played the soldier, the dead body, and you were the other. Why did you not take your clothes off? What are you hiding? And I said, you don't know my mother.
I mean, I think one thing it's impossible to kind of underestimate is really how rare on television at that time. We talk about now and the problems with diversity, but back in the in the 70s, to have a black face on TV was a very unusual thing, particularly in the presenting role.
I was brought up to believe by both my parents that nothing's impossible. If you want something, you go for it. And even if you get rejected, it's their problem. They can't see what you have to offer. So just move on. And that's how I've actually, when I became a presenter on Playschool, I saw it as an opportunity to change the world. And in fact, there was another wig story, because when I went for the audition for Playschool in 1976, I used to wear my hair in blue beads and plaits, which I think most people remember me for, and polo earrings. And I went for this audition. I thought, well, BBC might not like these plaits and beads, so I'll put a wig on. So I put this bubbly wig on, and I went for the audition, and I told them I could do this and I can do that, and I could see maybe she wasn't that impressed with me. So I said, by the way, I don't really look like this, you know. And she went, what do you mean? I said, this is what I look like, and I whipped the wig off, and down came these beads, and the rest was history. I became known as the lady with the blue beads. And while I was on Playschool, I realized that there were things that needed to change when it came to diversity. And I was reading the stories, and I was told how much I was loved by the audience, and everything was lovely. And I said to the producer, Cynthia Felgate, one day, Cynthia, darling, now listen, I'm telling the stories, and sometimes I'm saying it in my Caribbean accent, but all the imagery on the screen, all the illustrations are all white. Can't we have some black and Asian and Chinese faces? And she went, oh, we hadn't noticed. That's when I realized it's because people don't notice things. And my role was to make people be aware and to notice, to be inclusive. And that's the day when Children's BBC became the most diverse on British television. If you look at children's programs, you have everything. People with disability, people of different colors, different cultures, and children accept it. And I used to get letters from people saying, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. And it'd send me pictures of themselves and be ginger hair and freckles or blonde hair and blue eyes. Because they didn't see the color, they just saw the emotions of the person. They just saw someone who into their world. Hello, are you all right? It doesn't matter who you are. You're engaging, you're bringing people in, you're actually drawing people in, and you're being sympathetic, and you have I always call, there's a pulse of what you do. You take children up, and you bring them down again. Up, and all the children who are just watching you, because they're clocking what you're doing, they're the ones who are going to be creative. And you have lots and lots of different children who got crazy, children who just observe, children who think very carefully. And as a presenter, a good presenter, is aware of everyone around And the way you move and the way you talk and the way you do things, you're engaging all the time. So that was what I saw my job as, not as a stepping stone to become famous. Playschool, have opened so many wonderful doors for me. Who would have thought, 40 years ago, I'd be sitting on this stage talking about, my film the film that I love. Who would have thought going into Parliament? Who would have thought meeting the Prime Minister, meeting presidents, meeting queens, all because of Playschool? It's laid that path, and I believe childhood lasts a lifetime, and it's up to all of us to make children's lives happy and do whatever we can to change the world for the better for children. And that's all I've done, all I've done.
So we haven't got a huge amount of time left, so I want to move on to West Side Story. So when we first talked to you about what film you were going to choose, I was just checking back. I know that you talked about In the Heat of the Night was one, which we've shown recently, Porgy and Bess, Cabin in the Sky were three of the titles you talked about. But in the end, we ended up with West Side Story. Can you just share a little bit about why you chose this film? And can you actually remember when you first saw it?
Well, I really would have liked to show Cabin in the Sky because Lena Horne, she was the first black actress to get a leading role. And I wanted to show that, black actresses haven't actually made their mark as such in both the cinema and the theatre and on television, in fact. But the film, when I thought about it, the film that maybe I should have chosen before anything else was West Side Story. Because when you think about West Side Story is also a story that applies to any culture and anybody who comes to a new land that's different. I wrote my book, Come Into England, and Come Into England does the same thing. It's talking about me from living in Trinidad, coming to England back in 1960 and what it was like to be accepted, the adversity you have to face. And whoever watches this film or reads the book see themselves in it. Because it's nothing to do with colour. It's to do with emotions. It's to do with actually rejection. It's to do with adversity. It's to be how do you break down the barriers. And West Side Story tells it beautifully, the way in this particular production. What it does, it tells you that if you're from a different land, you've got to actually work really hard to be accepted. If you listen to the words in the song, I want to be in America, what it tells you, 12 lived in a room in America. When I came to Britain, there were 8 of us in one room. You've got to lose your accent. If you have an accent, nobody listens to you, nobody can understand what you're saying. Some of the songs apply so much of today's modern society. But young people, knife crime, gangs, they're talking about, not being, you, because you're a different color, a different race from me, we're not going to accept you. What the hell are you doing here? It talks about interracial marriage. I've got an interracial marriage. People, what they think about you if you marry somebody who's not from the same culture as you. It talks about so many different elements of life that we're actually experiencing today. People, that when you have that kind of feeling of family life, my brother dresses in a dress, my sister's got a mustache, my mother is on drugs, no wonder I'm a mess. That's what's happening to a lot of young children. And I do a lot of work for charity. In fact, I've run 10 consecutive London marathons because I am the vice president of the Barnardos, and I know how difficult it is for children who are going through...
And this is a film that's, it's over 50 years old, and as you say, it's still as pertinent today, and if not more pertinent, perhaps.
Very much so. It's so relevant today, and it's so poignant. At the very, very last scene, I do a lot of prison visits, and I meet a lot of young men, especially young black men, who've lost the direction. And that last scene tells you there are consequences of your action. And so this film has got many, many different messages on all sorts of levels. It's a very entertaining film, but at the same time, it's poignant, it's meaningful, it's dramatic. So you're getting it on all different levels, that kind of enthusiastic cauldron of emotions, of joy, of happiness, of love, tragedy, disaster, but also hope. Because I'm a great optimist. One of the songs in there is something coming, something good, don't know what, don't know why, and that's my husband and I anthem. We're hopeful. Never listen to what people tell you. They might tell you you're not worthy. They might tell you you're not going to be part of this world. But I know it's going to happen. It's going to happen somewhere, somehow.
Oh, I think it's time to watch the film, isn't it? Amazing. you.